morning and welcome back to the lecture series on refugee migration diaspora. So, today we are going to discuss our understanding of diaspora and its various dimensions. So, when we talk about romanticization of diaspora, the romanticization of diaspora can refer to the idea that migrants have an idealized view of their home countries, or conversely, that the locals have an idealized view of the life abroad. There are certain factors which contribute significantly towards the romanticization of diaspora. Orientalist portrayals of Western superiority that is perpetuated through media and academia can support the local population's admiration of life abroad. Diasporic identities are based on shared memories and myths, as well as a sense of belonging to an imagined community. Migrants share memories, nostalgia, and narratives of places of attachments with each other and also across the generations. So, this exercise of memory, this mnemonic practices, these passing down of memories, nostalgia, and narratives down the generations and also across, also enable, also shape one's identity in diaspora. The element of romanticization or the constant yearning for one's roots, specifically the spatial locations, has become a phenomenon for different immigrant groups, right? So, diaspora do not simply refer to a geographical dispersal, but it also defines the vexed questions of identity, memory, and home which such displacements produces, right? So, we are not only talking about what diaspora is, the phenomenon of geographical dispersal of a social group, but also the consequences of diaspora, what a diaspora brings forth, the vexed questions of identity, memory, and home. Van der Veer suggests that the element of a romanticization, which is present in every nationalism, is even stronger among nostalgic migrants who often form a rosy picture about their country that they have left behind. And then they are able to imagine the nation where it did not exist before, right? So the nation in the imaginary, in the imagination, is besides what it actually is, right? It is kind of wishful. It is what one wants to perceive it as, right? By referring to the essays of Gunter Grass, Salman Rushdie observes that literature of migration offers us one of the richest metaphors of our age. Adding to Rushdie's point of view, Fiji Indian author Satyendra Nandan notes that the idea of a metaphorical being is perhaps truer and more authentic about a writer than of any other member of a society. So, a writer is essentially a metaphorical being, according to Satyendra Nandan. Nandan further notes that a writer is almost always and everywhere either an exile or a migrant. And because of this distancing and distress, he may capture more vitally and vividly the very essence of our migratory experience. The continuance of a dialogue with the past in the form of plot, characters, actions in a fiction or a non-fiction, and through that process of writing, a constant looking back by the diasporic authors through memory, fantasy, narrative, and myth formations in their stories is actually to a large extent a consequence, an upshot of the notion of home. So, what is inspiring them here? What is propelling them here? The life force behind their writings, behind their plots, characters, narratives, fantasies, myth formations is the notion of home and its authority as constructed over the mindscapes of the diasporic individuals. And these factors are potential reasons for keeping romanticized spirit alive. So, in order to recreate home through fantasy, through narrative, through myth, the home has to be kind of revived. The home has to be represented and brought back into the discussion through a romanticized spirit. In the case of the Indian diaspora, how they represent their Indian identity under diasporic conditions through recreation, continuation, maintenance, and nurturing of their social and cultural uniqueness is often the product of their desires to connect with the country of their origin, their homeland, and with the other subcontinental diasporas that are present in the different regions of the world. And thereby, it gives a true global unity and identity. So basically, what motivates the Indian diaspora to write is basically connect with Indians from across the globe through recreating, through continuing and maintaining the discussion of the home. The desires, the memories are celebrated about the country of origin, and they are deriving their own identity through that discourse. This discussion, this attempt at redefining or reproducing the home is also something that enables them to celebrate their Indianness in a foreign soil. It enables them to celebrate their Indian culture, Indian origin in a foreign soil. In the words of Homi Bhabha, this is the celebratory romance of the past. Like I was saying, it is a result of the restrictions that migration has placed upon them and the creative possibilities that it has offered at the same time. So, this entire phenomenon of migration, of displacement, can be seen in terms of restriction or limitations as well as possibilities and new freedoms. This romancing with the past, this tryst with the past, is reflected in the creative output of the diasporic author. And Jasbir Jain, in this context, comments that, I quote, it continues to depend on the bits and pieces of its origin to hold itself together in the face of the onslaught, rejection, or domination by the other, by the world which both frightens and fascinates, unquote. So, writing becomes a therapeutic process, a process of continuing one's existence, of piecing together the shards of one's memories, one's existence, one's past. And writing becomes also a process of vindication, a process of defending oneself in the face of onslaught or the cultural justification that one is constantly having to give, that one is constantly producing in a foreign country in the face of onslaught, rejection, and domination by the cultural other, who is presumably also culturally superior. Writing helps. Writing, narrating one's past, narrating one's origin, tracing back, and trying to research, rework on one's roots actually enables piecing together one's identity. So, this is a way of defending one's fragmented identity. Vijay Mishra suggests that this fascination with or for what has been left behind, or with the very home idea in relation to what is to be acquired in the host land, is the consequence of the migratory displacement. In continuation to what Mishra says, Rukhsana Ahmad suggests that this process of rumination, this process of mnemonic practice, memorization, retelling of stories, in turn makes the writer imagine home the way that he or she wants it to be. That is, to quote Ahmed, a romantic idealization that fossilizes memories, and therefore it can also be referred to as the constant looking back syndrome, unquote. Right? So, like authors in the diaspora have called it, looking back in order to be able to move forward. So, the only way an individual in the diaspora can move forward is through this mnemonic practice, which becomes essential to one's existence, essential towards asserting one's belonging and identity, towards vindicating who one is, defending who one is. The return to a home or roots physically is also not always viable or possible because of other important incentives that are offered by the host land. In the very act of returning or turning back at the past, looking back at the past, lies the problematic of losing identity. And most important of all, losing the material opportunity that has been procured through hard work in the host land or places of migration. So, on the one hand, the host land is usually offering with a lot of material opportunities, a lot of opportunities in terms of better lifestyle and money, and in terms of access to social and economic resources. So it becomes almost impossible to go back to one's homeland, not feasible, not possible to turn back. So one has to recourse, one has to resort to writing, to the formation of a discourse that is standing on the edifice of, that is balanced on the edifice of romanticization. Next, we see that exoticization of diaspora is also a very common expression we are using in the context of diaspora studies. Exoticization of diaspora is the process of othering or making a diaspora group seem exotic or distant. For example, Asian Indian Americans may be exoticized for their accents, the way they speak English, their traditional dance or habits, the food they eat, as well as the music that they play and enjoy. So, exoticization can lead to microaggressions. Exoticization is actually an offshoot of racist behavior and racist way of thinking. It can very well lead to bullying and verbal disparagement, belittling of another social group. So, it can also make diasporic spaces feel unsafe and fragmented. Diaspora studies value the stories that diasporas tell about cultural encounters, transformations, as well as the emergence of new identities, new, often hybrid identities. Now, James Clifford, in his work The Predicament of Culture, which came out in 1988, suggests the following: the exotic is uncannily close. Conversely, there seem no distant places left on the planet where the presence of modern products, media, and power cannot be felt. Further, Candice Chu in Imagine Otherwise, which came out in 2003, suggests, I quote Chu here, to imagine otherwise is not simply a matter of seeing a common object from different perspectives. Rather, it is about undoing the very notion of common objectivity itself and about recognizing the ethico political implications of multiple epistemologies, theories about knowledge formation, and the status and objects of knowledge that underwrite alternative perspectives. Unquote. So basically, coming out of this whole idea of having a common objectivity, a common framework that is one size fits all, right? So that is very generalized, that can actually violate the individuality of different social groups, right? On the one hand, we have this, presence of modernity. We could, I don't know, we could call it the effect of the impact of globalization, where media, products, power is percolating into all systems, our different systems of thought, our different practices, and there is a tendency to homogenize, to flatten cultures. And yet, on the other hand, when we call something as exotic, it suddenly, distances someone from us. In a way, we are saying that the person is unfamiliar, the practice is unfamiliar. Exotic could actually be synonymous with weird, with strange, with something, from which we are seeking some kind of explanation or justification. So when we call something as exotic, we are not familiar of it, and it's outside of our knowledge system, and so it needs to justify itself. The image of the exotic is an important aspect of cultural representation, which is usually associated with the notion of cross cultural encounter and implies change, transformation, and appropriation of a culture in different socio-political and historical contexts. As a consequence of the encounter between different systems of social signification, cultural exoticization takes on special significance in the transnational space, and it provides a common ground for conducting debates and discussions over the representation of cultural otherness. How is the cultural otherness conceived? How is the culturally other represented? That is very close to this whole idea of cultural exoticization, and it is a consequence, an upshot of different systems of social significations coming together. And sometimes, most of the times when they come together, it results in a kind of hierarchy or some form of conflict. So, usually, a culture, a social group that is socioeconomically more powerful tends to exoticize and, in a way, impose its power on the cultural other. And the other always has to explain and justify its practices, its habits, its lifestyle to the powerful group. That is how it usually works in reality in a multicultural context. And that is how it actually occurs in reality in a multicultural context. The cultural images of Oriental women, for example, have long been circulated in the West in terms of their irresistible exotic features and have obtained a symbolic order of cultural otherness, right? These women, the way they have been depicted, the Oriental women, the way they have been depicted, actually symbolize cultural otherness. Kathy Song ironically describes in her poem about Kitagawa Utamaro's paintings of Japanese women, where the poem is helping us perceive the internal politics of cultural exoticization, and it recognizes the complexity that is associated with representation of the other or otherness across different cultures or different cultural lenses. Since the early years of colonialism, cultural exoticization has been a common practice of Western opinion makers, or we could say that their works have initially shaped knowledge about other cultures. The Western opinion makers that have navigated to other countries, to other places, and they have defined other cultures in extremely racist, problematic terms. The mysterious Oriental of Marco Polo, the noble savage of Jean Jacques Rousseau, and the romantic South Sea Islanders of Paul Gauguin are some of the examples where the non Western other has been portrayed in quite a problematic manner, in ways that actually accentuate racism and cultural hegemony, and it justifies inferiority of certain races as compared to the Western population, and it justifies inferiority the non-Western people in comparison to the white population. To a certain degree, exoticization involves a process of cross cultural domination. For example, the signification of Asian exotic cultures, according to Edward Said, suggests, I quote Said, a Western style for dominating, restructuring, and having authority over the Orient. So, according to Edward Said, signification of Asian exotic culture suggests a Western style for dominating, restructuring, and having authority over the Orient. To put it very plainly, when we say that the non Western other is a brown or a yellow person who is not very tall or who speaks with a certain accent or who has mongoloid features, we are not only describing about these attributes or characteristic traits, but we are also suggesting, like Said says, we are suggesting that all these traits make an individual inferior to the Western white man. So having a short height, having a brown skin, having mongoloid features, and so forth, actually are not an end to themselves. They are not natural features in themselves. They actually mean, they imply from the Western lens that these people are the cultural other, and hence they are inferior to, the white man, and they are the white man's burden. Therefore they need to be civilized, right? So there is definitely this underlying racist tone that is present when we call something as exotic, right? Double displacement is a concept that can be applied to the diaspora experience, and it can refer to the complex relationship between an individual's identity and belonging in a new country. The notion of identity and belonging can be called into question by the experience of double displacement. Displacement and then further double displacement actually deepens the fractures or the fragmentations in our formation of identity and belonging. Migration is an expression of shifting human environment relations in response to certain changing risks and opportunities. Under modernist development regimes, the perceived environmental qualities of a locality have been used as a way of justifying state led initiatives which encourage people to settle in particular places in order to exploit certain favorable conditions and resources. So, this human movement has a deep relationship with shifting human environment relation, right? So this movement has a connection with the shifting human environment relationship. Usually the movement is from a region of crisis, a situation of crisis, towards a situation of favorable conditions and opportunities, as well as better resources. Interestingly, while large scale state led resettlement schemes are often designed in response to life threatening risks without supporting the capacity of people to adapt to the everyday risks of deteriorating environmental conditions. So, when people actually move in large scale to a new land, as a way of saving themselves from an exigency, an exigent situation, but then their capacity is not built to adapt to the new environmental conditions. And further, when we see that in the new land there are reduced access to resources and there are limited employment opportunities, the livelihood precarity does not go away. So, one escapes. There are often situations where an individual escapes from an exigent condition, from an emergency condition back in their own homeland, to land up in a new problem, in newer livelihood precarities. So the precarity, the jeopardy persists, it continues in the new land, and this often results in double displacement. A person lands up in a new place without being adapted to the new risks, to the new environmental conditions, and has very limited access to the immediate resources, and the employment opportunities are also limited. All these factors can actually result in a further displacement, also known as a double displacement. As such, the increased outmigration from resettlement sites should not be seen as always indicative of new adaptation pathways. However, due to the largely involuntary nature of such migration, we understand them as an expression of the limits of adaptation in the new localities. Perhaps a group of people have not been able to adapt to a new locality, and hence they have decided to displace further. So they have undergone the experience of double displacement. People's livelihoods after resettlement are particularly sensitive to new cultural shocks and stresses, as the usual social, political, and economic strategies that they have been applying or relying upon in order to cope with and adapt to the environment may not be present or may not be applicable anymore. And in a new land, their coping mechanisms, their economic and political and social strategies all need to be reshaped. They need to, in plain words, in a nutshell, they need to actually refamiliarize themselves. They have to refamiliarize themselves, unlearn and relearn a lot of things. When a population or a people cannot adapt to these new mechanisms, new coping mechanisms, they have to be doubly displaced. They have to further move to another new land. So, understanding why some people leave whereas others stay is therefore crucial in explaining the uneven nature of displacement. While some people can adjust to a new land, others find it difficult, and it enables us to address the limits and opportunities that are associated with the locally oriented coping and adaptation measures that people develop after their resettlement. How people are, applying new coping measures and adaptation measures. While some group can use these mechanisms and they click, they actually work in a new land. For another group, their mechanisms, their measures, their strategies may not work, and they may not be able to adjust to the environment and decide to move further. This study, therefore, provides important insights on the relations between resettlements and migration, and demonstrates the case of double displacement for that section of people who have been unable to adapt to the changes accompanying and following resettlement to a new land. So, they have not been able to adapt to the changes and the challenges and the new situations that they faced while resettling in new land. Double displacement is a situation where people are unable to adapt to changes, and they migrate due to environmental or economic constraints in most cases. It can occur in a number of contexts, including A. Resettlement. So, resettlement schemes can be constrained by environmental and economic factors, leading to people being unable to adapt, and therefore they ultimately migrate again. For example, increased outmigration after resettlement can be a form of double displacement. And then the next factor is post-disaster migration. People who have lost their homes and livelihoods due to a disaster may be forced to migrate. For example, after the 2023 earthquake in Turkey, the Syrian refugees who were already displaced by war lost their homes and livelihoods again. So, these are some of the factors that provoke, that motivate double displacement. With this, we come to the end of our lecture today. Let's meet with a new topic and another round of discussions in our next lecture. Thank you.